Morality seems universal, guiding our actions and shaping our societies. But what happens when cultures clash and moral codes contradict? Welcome to this episode on moral relativism.
Hey everybody, welcome to Open Door Philosophy. I'm one of your two hosts today, Derek Parsons.
And I'm the second of the two hosts, Andrew. I don't have a cool title this week, actually.
The the saint.
The moral saint.
The moral saint.
Yeah.
Taylor is surviving finals, so Taylor is out on assignment, as we say.
Yeah, y'all had such a cool introduction last week where you conveniently left me out, and then you recognized that I wasn't talking, and so I wish that I was that creative. But that's okay. Okay.
It's okay. That was off the dome, as the kids like
Was
to
it
say.
really?
Yeah, that was not planned.
That's cool.
You know. We'll see if I have such creative energy today.
Yeah. Well, I cannot believe that we've never talked about this topic before we do our introductions. That's like the first thing that stands out to me. I cannot believe we've never done this topic.
Oh yeah.
But anyways, how's it going?
Yeah, I have a real beef with it, so this will be fun. It's going fine. It is raining, as it is. It is a customary for this time of year in Houston. So
yeah, but that's almost like an understatement. It's like
yeah, I know. Yeah, this time of year. I mean, I keep going back through conveniently all these social medias tell me what my memories are. That's a philosophical issue, but it seems like half of them this time of year. It's like, oh well, here's some flood photos of whenever. So lots of flooding this time of year. I got to tell you, Houston does many things well, but one of the things it does not do well is flood management. So, and that's not so much in the city; it's largely in the more rural area, outlying areas. East Texas right now, from here to Louisiana, is just like literally swamped.
Yeah, I'm curious though. Any city that gets this much water, are they actually good at? Maybe like countries that get monsoons, but I feel like there's probably better cities. I was going to try to be a Houston defendant, but it seems like our water, we get so much water, and then it seems like when it rains, the raindrops are so much bigger. I don't know. Maybe not.
East Texas is very good at rain. That's what it's really good at. It will rain for days, and it will be really big, heavy rain. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess an American city we could point to is maybe New Orleans, but even that goes south from time to time.
Yeah.
I don't know. You got to like contact the Dutch or something. Aren't they the one with all the expert engineers on dikes? Or
I don't know. I would
isn't
like to
half
go
their
there,
country
but,
under sea level or something?
yeah, something like that.
Yeah,
Something like that. That's pretty cool.
Talking out of my range. Anyway, I'm fine. I have jury duty tomorrow, so we'll see how that goes.
Civic duties.
Yeah, so many duties. So moral. An obligation. Anyway, how are you?
I'm doing good. I'm surviving the rain, and that's about it. Nothing too exciting. And so I listened to this episode that came out the last one I wasn't on there, and I heard you guys talking about this Taylor Swift album, and I just wanted to say, so I'm going to say it now. You guys, it's like you can blink twice and say you don't like it. I mean, this was the worst album by far. Okay, you can own up to it in a minute. I can say that.
Well, yeah, you can say that.
I can say that. It's like you guys can say that too, but that's my only opinion.
I will say it. It is the least favorite of the Taylor Swift albums. Now, it doesn't mean that there aren't some songs on it that I like. I mean, there are some songs on it that I like, but in its totality, yeah, it's just not my fave.
It's fair. Okay, that's a respectable opinion. Something has to be last, even if you think it's all great.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, I don't know. Right. We'll see where it's going. I'm hoping the trajectory of musical style there for Miss Swift takes a different direction next album. But it's fine. It'll in the great scope of things, let's say she puts out 20 albums. I mean, it'll fit nicely into the catalog.
Well, sometimes people just have to. I was going to use a worse analogy, a more Texas analogy. Sometimes you just have to know something good is over, I think. And maybe this is it, and maybe she has more, but you never know, I guess, as an artist.
Well, the bubble has to pop at some point.
Yeah, yeah,
It's been a crazy last 2 years for her, as far
yeah.
as success goes. So, but anyway,
So,
let us
yeah,
move
but
on.
anyway, this is our first episode, just you and me, in about I think more than
Oh,
a
long
year,
time.
where it's
Oh, well,
just,
more than
yeah,
a year.
it's
Yeah, a
just
year
us
and a half,
two.
maybe. Hmm.
I want to celebrate this reunion with a game that I came up with. Okay.
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 Back to Andrew's
Um,
games. You're like
I know.
the puzzle master or whatever the Saw guy is. What's his name? Jigsaw. Jigsaw.
I don't know. I've never seen it. I know the mask. That's much more like I don't know what the word is here. That's much more superior. I was thinking of the jester, the court jester, with the balls. So I guess that's a much more uh,
Oh,
protagonist or antagonist view of things.
I got to keep it edgy.
Yeah, yeah.
I've seen the
Huh.
first Saw maybe like, I don't know, 15 years ago or something.
I thought you were gonna say 15 times first, and I was gonna be like,
No,
"Wow,
no,
that's
it's
that's
not my
dark."
genre. It's not my genre. I don't like
Yeah,
horror movies at all.
yeah.
I'm like
I
reality's horrific enough. I don't need movies to make it any worse.
Yeah, I think the closest thing I'll go to horror is sci-fi, and that really freaks me out. So I stay
Mm,
far away. Anyways, okay, so this game that I have, it's kind of like a would you rather, but philosophy style. And I
okay.
think I know some of these, and I think our listeners will know where you fall on these. But so I'm not as curious on the side that you pick is more of the explanations
Hmm.
of why.
Okay.
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 So two scenarios.
Okay.
We have three groups of two. Okay, so first grouping. Would you rather, one, live in a world where your actions are predetermined, but you believe that you have free will, or you live in a world with true free will, but you're unsure of, if you have free will or not?
Mm, mm, I see. Well, well, gosh, I think it doesn't matter. I mean, if I have the illusion of free will, then I think I have free will.
Hmm.
So, from a practical standpoint, I guess it doesn't really matter. From I guess, a purist or something type of standpoint, I would say I'd rather live in a world with true free will, whether I realize I have it or not. I guess that's my answer, if that's an answer. I don't know. What do
Yeah,
you
I
think?
think that's an answer. Well, the party pooper in me wants to say, well, the first possibility can't exist, and so it's a non sequitur or whatever. But I think I more or less agree with you, and I'd probably pick the second, where we do have true free will. We have not yet done an episode. I don't think we've done one, but I feel like we have. But I
On
don't
free
think we've done
will?
it on free will yet. Or have we
No, I
just
don't
talked
think
about it a
so.
lot?
I'm sure. Oh, no doubt we've talked about it a lot. I don't know if we've done one just like straight free will. I have to look back through the catalog.
Yeah, that would be a fun one to do.
Hmm.
And I think what's more interesting too with that is like, what are the implications if we have free will and if we don't, especially in ethics? Let's look at a second grouping of scenarios, okay? And
Okay.
I think I know which one you're gonna pick, but okay, so would you rather possess absolute knowledge about the universe in the future, but you lose the ability to experience surprise and wonder? Or would you rather have limited knowledge and live with uncertainty, but you can still have the ability to learn and discover and be surprised?
Hmm. Well, I think I'd choose number two, choice number two. Unfortunately, what comes along with that is, this is relatively positive things. You retain the ability to learn, discover, and be surprised. Being surprised does not necessarily entail the thing that you're surprised about is positive. You could be like, "Hi, doctor. Oh, hello, patient. By the way, you have stage 4 cancer." Oh,
Right.
crap. So that's not a good type of surprise. But I do hope that there is wonder and beauty in the world to be discovered. I feel like that gives life a little more zest. Yeah, I think I'd still go with choice number two. How
Hmm.
about you? Or do I need to say more about that?
No, I think that's great. I think I would probably rather pick choice number two as well. I think that just part of being a human is not knowing
Mm.
about a lot of
Mm-hmm.
things. And I think if we
Yeah.
were robbed by that, we wouldn't be human. I'm a human. And so I think if I was fundamentally altered, I would not be the same thing. So I think I would also pick number two. I mean, that's kind of the beauty of life, even those dark surprises, I think.
No, it's true. And I mean, that's, yeah, even with the dark surprises, that is what makes life meaningful, I say, with a Dr. Evil Pinky indicating existentialism. But let me say a little more follow up on that, actually. So I teach a lot of philosophies of life in my course, and a lot of them end up with this notion of equanimity or tranquility of mind, non attachment to results, and all these types of things. And many philosophies advocate for that. And I feel like that's kind of like position one here in a way, because one of
Right.
my questions or criticisms, and certainly my students have the same criticism, is like, okay, well, non-attachment is great, and having a tranquil mind or a peaceful mind, it also sounds wonderful, but that also means you have a peaceful, tranquil mind during really happy, enthusiastic moments, and that seems to kind of take the zest out of life. Of course, you want a peaceful mind during tragic moments, but it goes both ways.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Okay, so last one, I'm gonna throw an audible here
Ooh,
and change it up a little bit. Okay. Would you rather live forever,
yeah.
but you can't die, or would you rather live a normal human life but eventually die?
Oh yeah, yeah. I know my answer to this one. I'd want to die.
Yeah.
Now, why do I think this is a good question? Thank you for asking. I have been around enough really old people who are going to die within 5 years or even sooner than that, and I mean old, like in their 90s, and they're kind of like, you know what? I've kind of done this thing, so ready to move on, and they're like totally peaceful with that idea. So kind of based on that, I'm like, okay, well, it must be, you must get tired of all this. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah. I think the idea of living forever scares me. There's
Mm-hmm.
this movement that corresponds with philosophy and with science right now called transhumanism.
Oh yeah.
And the goal behind transhumanism is, well, I'm sure there's a lot of goals, but one of the goals is that to develop a system where you could potentially upload your consciousness and
Mm-hmm.
live
Mm-hmm.
forever in a computer or something of this sort. And this idea, I think it is attractive to a lot of people, but one of those is not me. And so,
I was gonna say, I think there's something to be said for experience. Being a self-aware being. That there's something to that about being embodied, right? I don't know exactly what that is, but it seems like if I just had a abstract consciousness without being embodied in any sort of way, yeah, I don't know what that experience would be like. It doesn't seem like it would be as rich or full, but
I agree.
yeah, I don't know. I think.
I think I don't want to toe this line too much, and I think maybe I have a tendency to do it, but I think that human beings aren't just they're not just their consciousness in a way. And so if we rob
Mm-hmm.
ourselves of our body, it's robbing ourselves as essential elements of ourselves as human beings. And so would that be a particularly good existence to be robbed of our very selves? And I'm not sure about that. I mean,
Yeah.
it's the body is essential to our nature, and so is death. It's like the one constant. And so we rob ourselves of either of those two things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's like taking coldness out of a property of a cube, an ice cube. It seems just like
Yeah,
radically transformative.
that's interesting. I think a really good modern thought experiment on this comes from the world of Star Trek. And there's
Hmm.
a character named Data. Next
Yep.
generation fans will know this. In the most, well, I guess it's a reboot. Anyway, the show Picard, the first season of it, which came out a few years ago, Data resumes his role, and the exactly what you're talking about is what's going on. Like his consciousness can be uploaded because he's an android, but he wants to die. You know, it
Mm,
was really fascinating. He wants that experience of death. And if you
mm.
watch that entire show, Data often deals with these things that make us human,
Yep.
and always seeking those things. And anyway, the writers of the show obviously come to the conclusion that Data would not want his consciousness to exist forever. And if there's anyone who could ever pull it off, it's him, because he's an android.
All right, let's move into the topic of the episode. Enough gesterly Game Master games
Did
for
I win?
today. I think you won. You win
Yes.
a free ice cream cone.
I love ice cream. Wait, just the
It
cone?
only if, yeah, only if you
Oh, the
upload your
cone.
consciousness, you'll get the ice cream. Yeah,
Oh man, but I couldn't taste it because I would not have a
yeah,
body.
yeah, yeah. That would be really odd.
Yeah, what a prize! Thank you.
Yeah,
What a
anytime.
gift.
Yeah. So this is just you can also receive your free ice cream cone if you subscribe to our newsletter,
Ah, yes.
but you can only receive it if you upload your consciousness. You can subscribe to our podcast newsletter if you go down to the description of this episode, either on YouTube, wherever you listen to podcasts. I think if you go to our website, you can also do so. You can email us for a link. There's a multitude of ways to subscribe to the newsletter. We just released another one, and so if you subscribe sometime this month, you will get an introductory newsletter welcome email along with this month's email. Do that now. Send us an email and let us know what you think of it.
Yeah, everybody go do it, and especially for next month, I'm up in the rotation, and no doubt I
That's
will
right.
have some spicy takes on things.
Well, that's a really relative statement. Okay.
Nice segue.
Yeah, I try.
We'll segue on, man.
This episode, we are going to be covering this topic known as moral relativism, which stems off from a bunch of different avenues in philosophy, especially from it's kind of a combination of epistemology and ethics. And so I cannot believe, like I said at the beginning of this episode, that we have not covered this because moral relativism is one of the, I mean, it's a question that has gone way, way back in philosophy, and we'll talk
Mm-hmm.
about that. But it's also a really culturally prevalent topic right now and has
Mm-hmm.
been for past 100 years or so. So I think it's a really pertinent question for us to talk about, regardless of your opinions on the subject.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this. I think it is an incredibly relevant topic
Yep.
to talk about. It falls under meta ethics. If you study ethics, it's actually one of my when I think about the different ethics that I teach. This is the one I actually feel least prepared for, or least confident in. So it'll
Really?
be. I mean, yeah, I don't know why Meta ethics is the one where I always feel like I'm just a little bit on shaky ground. But
Hmm.
anyway, we'll see how it goes. I'm excited to talk about it.
Here's a few key questions that we're going to be talking about today. That encompass the system of moral relativism. First, can morality be entirely relative to an individual or cultural standard? Does the diversity of moral beliefs across cultures undermine the existence of objective moral principles? Does the fact that human sacrifice exists in one culture and that's seen as something that's positive and necessary for the society to function, does the fact that that exists in one culture but that's looked down upon in another disprove the fact that there's objective morals?
Yeah.
And then finally, if everything is in fact relative, how do we reconcile conflicting moral judgments and prevent
Mm-hmm.
moral chaos?
Yeah. Good questions. Those are tough.
Important questions, too, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I think a first good question for us both is maybe let's lay our cards out on the table.
Mm.
When is the first time that experienced or talked about or heard of this concept of moral relativism?
Oh, well, that's interesting. I have to go way back for me. For me, I have to go way back. Geez, I don't know. Okay, I think maybe I have an idea. So we've talked a lot about religion in the last couple
Hmm.
episodes, and I grew up in a particular religious tradition, Churches of Christ. I don't know if it was ever told to me, but there was definitely this clear notion that other religions would not make it into heaven. And that also applied to other Christian denominations. And I remember being a kid driving to church, and at some point, it dawned on me as we're driving past these other churches. I'm like, "Oh, wait a minute. this applies to these people, right? That heroes, these, what are Methodists? I don't know. I'm a kid. But I'm like, but I know that that has a different title than my church. And so maybe that's the first, that's at least an early one for me when I realized, there can be differences in moral conceptions. I mean, what's more moral than, getting into heaven? So I don't know.
Oh,
What about you?
I asked the question and don't have a immediate answer. That's always a bad sign. I don't know if this was the first, but I think one of the big deals with this was growing up in a time when I think the US was heavily involved in the Middle East, and we could see a lot of
Yeah.
values that these different cultures held.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think it's quite occurring, the ideas maybe of jihad and of rights of women and things. And it wasn't necessarily a religious question, but a question of values that the West held that these different countries held too. And I think that we often painted them as the bad guys and for doing
Mm.
these things and for limiting these principles. And maybe that's true. I mean, this is not right the purpose for this, but the thing that was clear to me is that these people didn't see themselves as the bad guys.
Hmm.
And they didn't, I mean, they don't think what they're doing is wrong. And so that was the first time that I
Yeah.
think I thought of these things.
Yeah, that's a great example. At some point in education, it's just going to strike children. It's like, oh, there are people that are different than I am.
Yep.
So whether you're sitting in third grade learning about the first Thanksgiving, you're like, why are these people wearing belt buckles on their hats? Um, you're like, that's a weird thing to do. I know
Yep.
it's not necessarily cultural relativism, but it's probably the first exposure we have, maybe as we're growing up, is like what we see, right? Rather than something like ideology, we see that there are differences in how people dress. And that is a cultural thing. That's nothing to do with morality per se, unless the dress does have something to do with morality.
Yeah. So we'll start to go over some philosophers in a second, but there's a varying degrees of moral relativism, and we don't want to misconstrue
Hmm.
people who hold the position is we want to be charitable to them. There's two types. Well, I'm sure there's more than two types, but there's two standard types of moral relativism that one often holds in a philosophical community. First is in observation more than a claim about morality, and I think we probably both hold this. And this is called descriptive relativism, and descriptive relativism makes a simple claim, and that's an observation that moral codes vary across different cultures.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is just the descriptive side. And then there's a step up from that, which is we could title prescriptive relativism, which is a further claim, which states that these variations across moral cultures mean that all moral judgments are equally valid, making it impossible to objectively judge another culture's morality.
Yeah.
There's quite a difference there between the two. One can hold the first without holding the second, but
Mm-hmm.
if one holds the second, they must hold the first. What's your thoughts about this?
Well, regarding cultural relativity, so I don't know exactly what I believe to be true. I know what I want to believe to be true. And that
Yep.
is that there is some objective morals that exists in the universe.
Yep.
But here's where the when we're talking about prescriptive versus descriptive, the leap that bothers me here is that just because there are cultures that have differing moral beliefs or similar beliefs, right? That doesn't really prove anything. That doesn't
Absolutely.
disprove moral objectivity. What it suggests is that like some cultures may be deeply misguided in what they think is morally permissible, but I don't see any correlation really between those two. I think it's just a too big of a leap.
I was going to bring this up, and I was worried that a disagreement might arise, but I don't know why I thought that. But I think that's right. Just because a different culture holds something doesn't mean it's right. I think we can imagine someone who would believe that, who would think that the jump is,
Oh, sure.
who might believe that jump is not as big of a cavern as we think it is.
Hmm.
Why might they believe that?
Well, I mean, the simple answer is probably because I don't think there's any objective morality.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what the argument is for saying that the fact that different cultures hold different moral values. I don't understand what the justification is for saying, and that proves.
Yeah.
that I don't know how we get there or how they get there. A thing I do think is kind of interesting about all this is this does kind of create a dichotomy for me when I'm thinking about this, which is, do all moral values, does it have to be 100%? Are there moral values that can be culturally bound, and that's okay? For instance, when we talk about objective morality, although I think there are some things that are objectively morally true, right or wrong, but I think that list is pretty limited. And so,
Mm,
if
mm.
one culture holds that a particular type of marriage arrangement is morally right, did you see where I'm getting at with this? Does everything that seems to be a moral decision, does that have to, if some are cultural bound, does that completely negate objective morality? But
Yeah.
I'm probably
Yeah.
taking on a road you didn't expect us to mean for us to go
No,
just yet.
no, no,
I'm
no,
very
no.
sorry.
That's no, no, that's fine. That's great. So I think that there's a few positions that one can take from this kind of meta-ethical standpoint on this question. I think that one can claim that there is universal, absolute moral truth that are instituted and in place by either some kind of concept or by a god or something of this sort. And I think so I think that's one position. And so if that is instituted, then I don't know if we can hold that same position. I think that really the strictness of the list would depend upon either that ethical conceptualization that exists in the universe or God or something. And so if one culture is completely following those set of ideas, however they happen to do that, then we could say, okay, that list is however long it is.
All right.
And I'm not sure if that's the case, but we could also have a second one, which a second kind of conceptualization, which maybe there is a concept of right and wrong in the universe, and one can in different cultures kind of shoot an arrow and they land somewhere along the target. And so some cultures get things right, some cultures get things wrong, but it's really difficult to know which cultures are right and wrong. But there is some right and wrong that exist, and cultures need to figure this out in some kind of way. And then I think there's a final position that we can hold, which is that there is no objective right and wrong in the
Mm-hmm.
universe. And that's where I think things can get kind of slippery.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by slippery is I think that we could say, okay, there's a right and wrong that we can get by human reason, by these principles or matter of fact, or we can say that there's just no right and wrong in general. And so we can take a number of positions, I think, on that last point, which we'll explore today, I think. I have four philosophical figures that I think we can briefly talk about. The first one is, I think, the first person in the West who advances some kind of concept of moral relativity. This comes from this philosopher named Protagoras, who is a pre-Socratic philosopher in the Hellenistic world. And he has this very famous quote that's been preserved through all time, which is, "Man is the measure of all things." I
Yeah.
think we've talked about this quote on here before, haven't we?
Perhaps, perhaps. We're getting so deep in how many episodes we've done over the
Yeah,
years.
it's
It's
like,
hard for me to recall specifics. Yeah, I don't know. Perhaps, perhaps.
yeah. So what do you think about this quote? Man is the measure of all things.
Doesn't Shakespeare have a similar quote? I'm sure he was referencing Protagoras. Write us in and tell us, people.
Yeah,
What do I think of it? So it's really funny. On one hand, I'm like, yes, I love that
yeah,
because there's so much about beauty and art and all these things that seem very human to me. Like, ah, yes, man is the measure of these things. And I can certainly see how, the Renaissance thinkers would have picked up on this idea with humanism. And like, yes, man is the measure of all things. But you're right. There's more to it than just that, and it does have an ethical dimension, right? And that's that human beings also create morality. We're the measure of that as well. That's kind of where I'm at. I do like the quote. It's very great for beginning conversations.
100%. Last time we talked about this quote, I think we had like a list of five philosophy quotes or something way,
Mm-hmm.
way back a long time ago. And I think when we were doing our quote review, yeah, I think we
The quote
both,
corner.
yeah, the quote corner. I think we
R.I.P.
both, it'll come back eventually, I think. It'll be
Sure, sure.
raised from the dead.
That's
Yeah.
right. Our 100th
Uh,
episode. We'll just do nothing but bits.
yeah. Yeah, we're gonna get there and then we're gonna have to do it. Okay. I think we both highlighted this word all that exists at the end of the quote of all
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
And for some things, I think that this has to be absolutely true. Man is the measure of all things. Okay. So I was at HEB yesterday, and we're recording this on Cinco de Mayo.
Mm,
And
that's
so
right. It's Cinco
that's
de
right.
Mayo.
Yeah. We
Okay.
should have a special theme. Okay. So this mariachi band was playing in the front of the store yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so to me, I don't know anything about the great mariachi tradition. And so I thought, okay, well, they're pretty good. They're fine. But if somebody else came in who is an expert mariachi player or, knows all of the significance of the mariachi, they might say, well, the outfits aren't exactly right, or, the violinist didn't come in at the right time, or maybe they're actually absolutely great. But I guess the way that we measure their goodness or how great of mariachi they were, it really changes depending on who's making that observation and that inference in the moment.
Mm, mm-hmm.
But to say this about, hopefully, both of us agree, and I think we do, that the extermination of the Jews in 1940s Europe was a bad thing. But the fact that some in Germany thought, okay, this is going to actually help and advance our society back in the day, thought that that was a good. I just feel like that's not a good and very compelling thing to say in that moment. That just because, we're measuring things differently, for them it's right since they think it's a good. For me, I think it's a bad. For us, we think it's a bad. And so it's really up to the individual. I'm not really convinced by that.
Well, there are some things that are morally neutral, right? For
Hmm.
instance, we could be, or like mariachi. I mean, I don't know if there's anything necessarily
Yeah,
moral about mariachi
yeah,
bands. Or
yeah,
we could say the same about chocolate cake. This
yeah,
is a delicious, watching the British Bake Off, and Paul's like, this is
yeah,
delicious. And Prue's like, ooh, it's
yeah,
stodgy. And,
yeah,
whatever. Like there's no morality in this. Man is literally the measure
yeah,
of this chocolate cake.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, do you like my reference there? I'm
To the,
trying to be relevant, talking about popular shows, which I don't even know if that's popular, but
well, I think the popularity of that is relative in itself.
oh yes, indeed,
Uh,
indeed.
yeah,
Right, so it's
yeah,
morally neutral, right?
yeah, yeah. Well, I don't know if it's moral at
But
all, like you're saying.
murder or genocide is not morally neutral.
Yeah, I think this is where we can be slippery on this topic of relativism as a whole.
Hmm.
Things are relative. Even the person who's going to say objectively, I think that they would say there's a lot of things that are relative in the world that depend upon you and your taste and your preferences. For morality, we can say that things are moral and still hold that you like pepperoni on pizza and Jim down the street doesn't like pepperoni on pizza, and both of you are right.
No, Jim
Yeah.
is wrong. I love pepper. Every time we get together, where my parents live, the town I grew up in, Tulsa, we always like to get pizza from this one
Yeah.
place.
Yeah.
And every time we're there, we get pizza from this one place because it's the best.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
everyone likes these weird, combinations of stuff toppings and everything. And I'm just like, can I please just have a pepperoni pizza? And they all look at me like I'm nuts.
Yeah.
They're like, just pepperoni. I'm like, well, obviously cheese and sauce too. I mean, but they're like, you're mad. I'm like, no, this is as good. Like, it can't get any better than this.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
very, very relative.
No, absolutely. Absolutely.
So
Um,
Protagoras, what he should have said was, man is the measure of many things.
I thought you were going to say man is the measure of chocolate cake or something.
Well, I think
Of
it would fall
pepperoni
under
pizza.
that.
Yeah.
Of pepperoni
No, that's
pizza.
right.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's right.
Okay.
Well, wait, wait,
I
wait. I know you want to move on to something
yeah.
important, but you're Italian. So how do you feel
Yeah.
about pepperoni pizza?
I guess it's fine. Yeah, I mean, I guess
I
it's
want
fine.
some
They have
strong views here. Come
Yeah,
on.
I don't have strong views on this topic. I was
No.
gonna say maybe I can sidestep and put this one in for your consideration. I don't know if this is an Italian thing or an Italian American thing, but everyone in my family who's, Italian and whatever, they love pistachio ice cream. And when
Oh,
I get it,
yeah.
I mean, this was like a childhood thing when I think my grandparents, they loved pistachio ice cream. My aunts and uncles and cousins, it's like their childhood memories, getting pistachio ice cream. And same with me. But then when I go to somebody else and I'm like, oh, I love pistachio ice cream, they're like, what? So how do you feel about pistachio ice cream?
How do I feel about it?
Yeah,
Oh, I mean, I love anything that's culturally bound when it comes to cuisine. Like a pistachio ice cream or maybe gelato, is this what we're talking about?
yeah,
If that's like something that Italians love, I'm like, I want that too. Like I
yeah,
want to try that. I'm
yeah,
intrigued by it.
yeah,
So I'm fine with pistachio ice cream. I think when we were in Italy, we surely had some. That sounds very familiar. Some pistachio
yeah.
gelato.
I had it right under the Duomo in Florence.
Oh,
Uh,
did you? Well, then I'm sure
yeah,
we had it.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm sure. Anyways,
Uh,
enough
yes.
about food.
Sorry.
I'm getting hungry.
I
No,
am
no.
too.
Let's skip Nietzsche, although we might get some hate comments unless you want to say something about him.
Well, I think we've talked about Nietzsche already without
Yeah,
talking about him. So he has
yeah,
this view called perspectivism. And this is kind of exactly what we're talking about, right? So
yeah,
you have these multiple interpretations of reality, each within its own validity, depending on the perspective of from which it is viewed, like pistachio ice cream or pepperoni pizzas. And I think that's a very important theory to think about. But I think we've already talked about it. But yeah, Nietzsche, I don't know if he used the word perspectivism, but I've more than once read that in in places.
I don't know. I'm not a big Nietzsche reader of Nietzsche, but maybe that will change one day. Okay, so I have two philosophers on here who are both contemporary, who have wildly opposing thoughts, but are
Hmm.
unified in their shared Britishness. Although I know one lived in Australia for quite a time. And we've talked about both of these on the podcast in different things before. J.L. Mackie, we've talked about
Yeah.
for his views on religion,
Hmm.
philosophy of religion. I think that's what he's most known for. But this is a pretty close second. And so J.L. Mackie, he was a British philosopher in the 20th century. I guess that's all the context for him. But a cool side note that I mentioned before that I just keep bringing out because I have to. His daughter was my ancient Greek teacher, which I think was super cool.
Oh, that is
Okay,
cool.
yeah,
Very
yeah.
nice.
Yeah, and she never told us that, but she would always slip in when I brought up something philosophy related. My dad once discussed this topic with me, and then I put the pins together one time. I am going to raise this topic of he presents this kind of trifold view argument for why moral relativism is true. He came up with this idea called moral error theory, which is basically this argument that moral judgments that we make in the world are fundamentally mistaken because they assume objective moral properties that just don't exist. Basically, his point here is that if we take away the human being or human society or humans altogether, there's no moral truths that just exist in the universe. And
Hmm.
for us to assume a priority that they exist, if we do assume that, then of course, but if we don't and we look at the truth, then there's no objective moral principles in the universe, and therefore we should all be moral relativists because these truths don't exist independently outside of humans, which I think is true. If we do assume that there's no moral principles which exist independent of humans, I think we must believe this. Although there are some philosophers who would disagree. Let me give an example here, real quick.
Hmm.
I don't know, to be honest, if this is if this is morally wrong, but I can imagine that it is. But I'm not a Muslim in any way. I believe that they have this city of Mecca, which is a quite important city to Muslims. I think that destroying that city or the Black Rock would be probably pretty bad and be seen as is pretty morally bad. So we remove all human beings from the universe. They just they disappear tomorrow.
Hmm.
Every human being disappears. And I don't know why, but maybe the nuclear codes have to be put in every day so they don't all go kaboom. And so one nuclear bomb just happens to drop on the city of Mecca, and the city goes kaboom. Independent of human beings judging the situation happening, would this act be morally wrong. This is such a horrible example, actually. Uh, if you have another one, you
In other
can.
words, you've selected something that is
Yeah,
incredibly significant to a particular culture.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
That was the aim. But I don't know if itself is morally. I think I can make the case for it, actually. Like, I don't think we should go around destroying other cultural like things that are very important to them, or I don't think that they should be destroyed. I think they should be preserved. So yeah,
yeah,
why
yeah,
not?
yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed.
And so Mackey's point here is that, well, independent of humans, this really wouldn't be a morally bad thing that happens. I think we could also take like history as an event on itself. So if all humans go bye-bye tomorrow for whatever reason, nuclear war or just disappear as a thought experiment, well, he might not want to bring this up, but would the Holocaust have still been wrong?
Yeah.
And it seems intuitively to me, and I'll get your opinion on this, that yeah, this is still wrong, but I don't exactly know why. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so it's like if we're not here to judge, judge might not even be the word. If we're not here
Yeah,
to observe this
yep,
event, is it objectively morally wrong or right outside of all space and all space and time?
right,
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it wouldn't be. So let's take the universe existed before human beings showed up. So as the Earth began to form, and we had small, very small, microscopic creatures that that lived and died, and then they evolve into more sophisticated creatures, but certainly don't have the capacity to reason like human beings do or whatever. Those things lived and died. We weren't around for any of that.
yep.
Through their deaths, they were eaten by other things. Are their deaths wrong or right? Maybe that's a way to look at it because we weren't there. We weren't there for any of that to happen. I don't know. This is what happens when I come up with examples off the
It's
top of
tough.
my
Yeah,
head.
yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because if you go with a morally objective theory that there are morally objective values in the world of good and bad, then it would be independent of human beings.
Right. Yeah. What might make it even more difficult is the fact that I don't know. I was going to say I think the fact that human beings are these creatures who what is unique to varying degrees among other things that exist in the world is that human beings have this choice of good and evil and can do good and evil things, but also can recognize good and evil. And so, maybe like the antelope getting eaten by the lion in a horrific manner, is that really bad? I don't know. I mean, I'm sure somebody can make a case for it. I don't know. But the fact that Jimmy goes and murders Susie because of whatever reason, I think we could say, I don't know. I don't
I
know.
mean, why did I go back to prehistory? Why didn't I just use the antelope and lion example? Thank you for
It's
making that
okay.
much more
Yeah. Yeah.
simple.
It's okay. Yeah.
The
Yeah. I don't know.
off
I
the
think
dome.
it's off the dome. I love that phrase. There's two things to say about it, and I think both of them can be said better said than myself. A second philosopher, G.E. Moore, who writes an argument in response to Mackie. And the interesting thing about G.E. Moore is that he's actually quite more of a epistemologist than Mackie is, I think. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't think Mackie's feelings would get hurt because G.E. Moore, he has this very famous argument for the existence of things actually existing outside of the world, which we've gone over before, which is he raises it was this famous lecture series. He raises his right hand, he raises his left hand, and then he says, I raise these hands, they exist in the world. And that
Yeah.
was all the proof that he needed. It's a 4-page paper. People should check that out. It's actually free, I think, on Phil Papers. It's quite funny. G.E. Moore's argument for against moral relativism. His argument's a little complicated, but I have a nice example about chocolate cake later that will make it all the more sweet. So Moore's argument revolves around this idea of goodness, not really as a thing which stems off of the properties of something, is really of a deeper question which goes past physical properties itself. Okay, and so he's going to say, if we look at a thing's properties, we can say, okay, these properties itself, we can debate if they are alone or good and bad. But the question of, okay, Is the object itself good or bad? That still exists, independent after looking of all of these properties. First premise, if good is identical to some natural property X, then the question, is X itself good, is meaningless. Premise two, the question, is X good, remains a meaningful and open question even after understanding X's natural properties. And then the conclusion that he draws is, therefore, good cannot be identical to any natural properties. And since the question of goodness remains open, it's not remained to another natural property, which is in relative nature to an individual or to a thing. Here's an example that he raises, or not that he raises, but that I try to come up with, but I'm not sure if will be sufficient to explaining it well. So imagine that we have a piece of cake in front of us that it just looks scrumptious, it tastes really good, it's delicious. We can analyze the various properties that it has naturally. We can analyze its sweetness, how thick the cake is. We can describe its texture. We can describe the rich ingredients that it has, and we can certainly do more than that. But the point that he raises is even after we fully take all of these properties apart, we can analyze them, we can understand them. The question, is the cake good? That still remains independent upon all of these questions. And it still makes perfect sense. And we can still contemplate its goodness independently of all of these natural qualities. And what this means is that the concept of goodness itself, it's a unique concept that's exists outside of the physical properties of the cake itself, and that can't be boiled down to any specific property itself of the cake. And so Moore's point here is that if this concept exists independently outside of all of these properties, these physical properties, then it must exist outside of the thing itself, outside of human beings, that we can latch on and that we can consider regardless of our preferences. What do you think about this? It's kind of a complicated, odd argument,
Yeah.
but
No, I get it, and I really like that.
yeah,
So if I'm to think of like some morally abhorrent action, let's just say murder. Everyone almost universally agrees, I think, that the murder is wrong. So person A walks over to a rando in a mall and stabs him, and the person dies. We have some physical types of properties that we can talk about, right? You know, the motion, the movement of the person walking towards them, the knife itself. We could describe that. You know, the sticking it into the person's body. We can describe all these properties, right? So if we take all of those properties away, is it still morally wrong to do that? The answer is yes, I think, and it's
yeah.
not dependent necessarily on those properties. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, yeah, that's
Yeah, yeah.
absolutely right. I think this goes to this question, interestingly enough, this kind of concept of meaning which exists outside of data.
Mm,
And goodness, I think, is part of that. We make sense of a thing's
yeah.
goodness outside of its qualities. And I know that you're not a big, and neither am I, but I know that you're not a big Jordan Peterson fan. But I think I heard this example that he made once, and I think this is something that he's right about because I think he talks about meaning in some ways before he
Yeah.
got into politics. And I think this is right. And so I think this is him, but don't, if this was somebody else, don't get upset. I'm sorry. Let's imagine this kid named Jimmy, okay? And Jimmy is someone who's kind of like Spock. He really is deeply entrenched inside of the data of things, but can't
Hmm.
really, he has no imagination. He can't really make up a story or a concept of things. And so Jimmy, he's a fifth grader. He comes home from school one day, and Jimmy's mom asks him, Jimmy, how was school today? And Jimmy says, well, it was 82 degrees Fahrenheit at school. We read a bit of a book, and then we had nap time for 30 minutes, and then we went outside to play for 20 minutes. We played kickball. We scored 1 point. If we heard this, we would be like, and the mom, I think, appropriately is like, are you okay? Like, is everything okay with you? Because the data alone does not describe the meaning of a
Right.
thing. And so,
It's like, Jimmy,
And so,
but did you enjoy school
yeah,
today?
yeah,
Was
exactly.
kickball fun? These types of things, right?
Yeah, yeah, and then Jimmy might say in response, like, "Well, kickball. The ball was deflated by 3/4 of a degree," and we would look at Jimmy like, "Jimmy, what the heck?" Okay,
The data
because
suggests.
exactly. And so I think that there's concepts like goodness and meaning, which, yes, they might exist. Is this concept which human beings relate to and that human beings subscribe, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not independent of human beings or they might be concepts themselves apart from the empirical and physical part of the world, which human beings can metaphysically connect with and value, unconnected from physical things of this world. Anyways,
Yeah. So, kind of a question for the listeners is, where do you land here? Are you with Mackie
yeah,
or are you with Moore?
yeah. And how does that influence your the way that you think about the world? Because
Mm-hmm.
either position that you take, and I don't think this is one where you can really be neutral on the subject,
Mm-hmm.
which is interesting. They radically change how you can think about the world and how you exist in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the things I like teaching about ethics and morality, is that it is very applicable to our lives. There's lots of really cool things in philosophy, like consciousness or something, and that's important too. We can, because that's important, free will and things like that. But none of that really impacts our daily life
That's right. Yeah.
in the way that morality and ethics do.
This was one last comment I wanted to make about the last episode, but this discussion last week around the analytical tradition,
Oh,
where
uh-huh.
we were,
Was I making
I
jokes about
think,
it? I can't remember.
no, 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 but I think there's this discussion, why do we limit aesthetics in philosophy?
Oh,
Uh,
right.
and I have two things to say. I think the question is a little misguided. Is the analytical position wrong because it doesn't talk about the aesthetic tradition so much? I think we can still look at the aesthetic tradition in philosophy in an analytical frame. I think that just people don't want to right now. And so I don't think that's on its own as a hit against the analytical tradition. But I think in the same way, the analytical tradition uses these great tools to dissect these really complicated topics as we've seen in this episode. And it
Mm-hmm.
has tremendous value because these things are so applicable. And so I think it makes sense. Like, this is a big question. It makes sense that our attention is on these issues like ethics and political philosophy. They're big, big issues which impact how we think about the world. Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, he was a great Supreme Court Justice writer. He says that the world was influenced more by Kant than Napoleon from his
Mm-hmm.
ethical thinking. And I think that's true. Like
Yeah.
the way that we think about these radically change millions and billions of people's lives.
I mean, I absolutely agree. The analytical tradition, I think, go use the word best. It's best to try
Yeah.
to approach these problems from. Now, I think maybe last episode my criticism was the analytical tradition dominates.
There's too many people.
Um,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
yeah,
You're right.
dominates university instruction.
I think that's just true, but I think also there's a reason for that.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but you're absolutely right. When I was still at Rice, I was talking to a graduate student at the time who was really upset about that.
Mm,
She was really wanted a program that was continental, and the sad fact is like the programs that are continental just they don't have enough money, they don't pull good professors, and so the students who go there just are I mean, not in all cases, right? But they're not able to compete. They're not able
mm.
to compete, and which is sad, but it's just the truth.
One of my criticisms for moral relativism is just not very satisfactory when it comes
Yeah,
to trying to determine the rightness or wrongness. Because, if I think that something is wrong and you think something is right, well, great. We have nothing that we can agree upon. My
absolutely.
my belief that it's right and your belief that it's wrong is in are many ways are equal. There's no meaningful moral proposition that we can put forth if you're just like, yes, Messe is the best. And I'm like, no, Messe is not the best. Well, all we're saying there is like, I approve of Messi, or rather you approve of Messi, and I disapprove of Messi. And that's all we're
Right.
saying. And so, when it comes to things like murder, I say murder is wrong, and you say, oh no, murder is right in this case, And really all we're saying is, well, we disagree with each other. And there's no
Ooh,
satisfactory conclusion to those types of statements.
ooh, that's right. Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, that's one of my beefs with it, is like we've not concluded anything.
I prefer chicken though,
Chicken, as opposed to what?
as opposed to beef.
Oh, I see. Well, depends on what you do with it.
Yeah, that's true. I cooked up a mean fajita yesterday.
Oh, man, I bet it was
Yeah.
delicious.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm a very awful cook. Do you want to do the book corner real quick, or do you want to
Oh, yeah, let's do book corner. Is that what we call it? Bookshelf. No?
bookshelf?
Bookshelf. Hey, let's head over to the
Yeah.
bookshelf. Well, last episode we talked about Mr. Dennett, Daniel Dennett, the great American philosopher, passed away. So he came out with a memoir last year, and his death inspired me to go ahead and purchase that. It was on my list. I hadn't gone to the
Right.
trouble of purchasing it yet.
Yeah.
But anyway, I have it, and I'm reading it. I'm about a third of the way through it. It's just really fascinating. Some things about him that I just certainly had no idea about, which, I mean, from everything from he was an incredible pianist. He also did sculpting, all before, he went to Oxford. And, the list of luminaries, philosophical luminaries who he knew at Oxford is impressive. And, I just didn't know those things.
Yeah.
So it's a really great book. He's a really good writer. And when I say good, what I mean is he's entertaining to read. I mean, it's an enjoyable thing to do. Reading, of course, is always enjoyable, but he's a captivating actor's like, no, he's a captivating writer. I also think that's probably one of the reasons he's one of the more well-known philosophers. Anyway, it's a good book. Check it out. It's Daniel Dennett. The title is I've Been Thinking.
Let's cut it. Let's end it.
Oh, you don't have a book you want to talk about?
Oh, no, I figure let's just leave it with you. I have one, but for next time. Yeah.
Okay.
You can check out my newsletter for a book review. How about that?
Yes, that's right. That's good.
Yes.
Hey, well, that's a good segue. Since you'll talk about the newsletter in the outro, that's a good time to say, hey, everyone, thanks for listening today. We really appreciate that you do. We know your time is important, and we always value that you have taken some of that time and spent it listening to us talk about pizza and things.
Absolutely.
Taylor's not here. Which one picks up Taylor's bit?
Rock,
paper, scissors?
You go for it.
Okay, all right.
We're going to do half, and I'll do half? Yeah.
Oh, I don't know where the line is in the half. I don't know where to draw that line.
I guess we just have to improvise some. Yeah.
I guess we will. We'll try half. Hey, everyone. Are you listening? We'd love to hear from you. So give us your thoughts about the episode, ideas you thought were good, things that interest you, things that you feel like need some correction or clarification, or just send us random stuff for us to think about. Yeah, just give us a contact. We have an email, contact@opendoorphilosophy.com, and then you can also hit us up on Instagram. We are there as well.
Instagram. Yeah,
Instagram.
Great. And make sure also to go and sign up for our newsletter. You can do this anywhere we are. So just scroll down right now wherever you're listening and subscribe. It's great. Yeah, it's super fun. And send us an email and let you know what you think about the newsletter too. And if you subscribed, we will probably respond unless we get eaten by like a lion who's looking for an antelope. Okay.
We'll respond. Don't worry.
We'll respond. Hopefully. Yeah. Unless all humans disappear tomorrow, in which case I don't know why you are subscribing to our newsletter.
You probably have better things to do.
Probably. Yeah.
Don't forget YouTube.
Also YouTube. Yeah, absolutely. So please subscribe to us on YouTube. We're having a lot of fun there, and you can see our faces. Okay.
See our faces.
And you can
if you really feel like you need to see our faces,
you can try. Yeah, that's right. All right, guys. Thank you so much for listening. We enjoy listening. No. Okay.
We enjoy doing it. How about that?
Yeah, enjoy doing it. Absolutely. So we enjoy doing it, but I'll be glad for Taylor to come back next episode. And I'm sure she'll be glad to be back from her wild school year. All right,
Yeah.
so remember, when your life is in need of some philosophy, the door is always open. Thanks.
Bye, guys.